Hello and welcome back to the World Championship in through the ages. Today we are going to take a look at the second one of the four-player games of my group, and in case you don't remember how the first game went, there I was able to win. Malakesh finished second, Brightfuture third, and Kharny fourth, so that is the situation after the first four-player game has finished. And yeah, now today we are going to see whether I will be able to continue my nice start, or yeah, if maybe one of the others will win, and then the situation of course is quite a bit closer before we are going into the three-player games. Alright, and before we're going to start taking a look at the game, we as always will first of all take a look at the leaders and wonders. And we can see that we have Pierre on the internet in H3, we have also Sid Meier on the internet, we have Sid Meier, Bill Gates, Marie Curie as some lab leaders. There is Mandela in the game, there's Gandhi in the game, but no Churchill. There's the Manhattan Project for the military, the Red Cross is in the game, which is important. In H2 we have some strong wonders, Ocean Liner Service, Suez Canal and Harvard College. For the Suez Canal we have also James Cook, so there is some colonization payoff. We have no railroad, but there is James Watt. We have Darwin and Anthony Gaudi, but the other culture leaders with Bach and Shakespeare aren't there. We have Newton, but no Nobel, and two military action leaders with Napoleon and Robespierre. In H1 we have the two strength wonders with the Meiji Castle and the Great Wall, then Forbidden City and Silk Road are both quite some strong wonders. It could be a strong masonry game with Great Wall, Forbidden City, Silk Road in H1, and an Ocean Liner Service, Suez Canal in H2. We have one military action leader in H1 with Joan of Arc. Saladin is a very solid leader. We have both Leonardo and Gutenberg for some lab and printing press energy, especially alchemy in four-player games maybe. Printing press is a bit more difficult to pull off. We have Nostradamus and Genghis Khan to help with the strength, and then Eleanor is a nice transitional leader, but also a leader that can maybe set up nicely a colonization game. Brightfuture is playing the first position and he just goes for Aristotle, which I think should be a fine pick. And then I think for my turn it's relatively clear that I have to take one of those wonders, because the only leader that I could take is Homer. But if I take Homer plus either Richland or Urban Growth, then I have to expect that all of those wonders might be gone before my next turn, and then I might just get him together with the Hanging Gardens, which isn't a great combination. Or maybe I could get the Colossus, which is fine, but I don't think there's any need to risk going for Homer here, especially because there are already some fine leaders coming down the row, and there's also a chance that Hammurabi might be revealed, and Brightfuture, with having already committed to a leader, would not be able to take him away from me. So I think yeah, I should just go for one of the wonders here. There are quite some strong ones in the row. I think in four-player games, Stonehenge is a little bit weaker than Library and Roman Roads, so I think that's the wonder that I definitely will not go for. And then it was a close call for me between Library and Roman Roads. Generally, in four-player games, I actually value the Roman Roads a little bit more highly than the Library of Alexandria, even though I think it's extremely close, and if some other players value it differently, I also wouldn't argue against it. But I personally, lately in four-player games, value Rome Roads a little bit more highly. However, when we take a look at what leader I might be getting at my next turn, there is a chance that I might end up going for Cleopatra, because maybe Boudica might be taken away by one of those players behind me, and then if Hammurabi isn't revealed, then I think Cleopatra is just the straightforward choice for me. And if you have watched my video that I recorded lately about some Leaders and Wonders synergies, there Cleopatra plus Library was actually a combination that I valued quite highly. I think that works just very smoothly together, and because of the chance that I might get Cleopatra at my next turn, I decided to go for the Library, even though I actually thought that it is maybe more likely that I will get Boudica or maybe also Hammurabi, but I might get Cleopatra, and that was already enough for me to rather go for the Library here instead of for the Roman Roads. Malakesh goes for Homer and the Roman Roads, so that's a solid first pick for him. And then Kharny doesn't go for Boudica and instead goes for the Stonehenge, Richland, and the Urban Growth, which I think makes sense. Those are two decent yellow cards, and combined they are worth similar to an engineering genius, and he gets a decent wonder together with it. And as you can see, there is actually Hammurabi revealed. There is maybe even a chance that if Brightfuture takes the Hanging Gardens here, that Hammurabi drops down to one civil action for me, but he lets him stay on two civil action for me. Maybe he either wants to leave himself open for an H1 wonder, or maybe wants to go for the Colossus at the next turn. And for the Colossus there is, as we saw, some synergy in the game with the Suez Canal, James Cook, Eleanor, so That could also, of course, be a decent call to leave yourself open for the Colossus. Now I have to decide what leader do I want to go for, and I think all three of them could be very fine for me. I think if I go for one of the ones on the one civil action area, then despite Cleopatra working very well with the library, I think I would still go with Boudica, but I would also understand if other players would maybe go with Cleopatra in the situation. But at the end I decided to just go for Hammurabi. And I do think it could also be fine to just go for Boudica for civil action cheaper. Instead of going for Hammurabi for 2, but Hammurabi gives me that civil action back basically immediately at the cost of a draw, of course, but then from the next turn on I will be playing with additional civil actions, which I think is just worth very much. And if I don't take Hammurabi, then a Kharny might be able to get him. Of course, he's playing in 4th position, maybe it's a bit dangerous to go for him, but he has the Stonehenge, and I think Stonehenge and Hammurabi is just an insanely strong combination, especially also with having those 2 yellow cards available. So I think he would have quite a strong start, and even though hate drafting is not the most important when decisions are closed, and that is of course also playing a part, but even without that, I maybe also would have gone for Hammurabi here. I draw 1 card, the Raiders. Then it's Malakesh's turn. He takes the Engineering Genius and then builds a mine. It's a bit expensive to take the Engineering Genius. Of course, it allows him to finish the Rome roads very quickly, but the Rome roads also take a bunch of civil actions. He needs a civil action to replace Homer at some point, so maybe I would just elect Homer here, but then of course he also needs to take something, so probably it's fine at the end to take the Engineering Genius. Kharny goes for Cleopatra, which I think with the Stonehenge is a valid choice, even though I would probably go for Boudica. It's interesting because also in the first 4-player game he didn't go for Boudica and rather went for Hippocrates, so maybe he doesn't value her that highly. And then he builds the 2nd lab and increases his population. Brightfuture gets an early copy of Code of Laws together with Aristotle. I think that's quite nice for him to have, and maybe there's even a chance that he can develop it at the next turn if he is able to get the technology with Aristotle, so that will give him a very quick 5th civil action. There's actually Saladin coming down the row, which is for me not the biggest improvement with having Hammurabi, but I could take him away from my opponents and just settle for a very solid leader for quite a long time. But there will actually be a new card revealed now at my turn, and that I at the end made the decision clear for me that I won't go for Saladin, and that is this early monarchy. An early monarchy revolution with Hammurabi is just insanely strong, even though I have to take it for 3 civil actions. I think it's totally worth it here and stronger than any other option that I have available in my opinion. So I take the monarchy, I build a 2nd lab, increase my population, I prepare myself as good as I can to do the revolution without corruption at the next turn, and then I think that could really put me in a strong position. Ideally, I can do the revolution at the next turn. In 2 turns, I can finish the library, get some more economy going, and then maybe go into attack or something. And yeah, I was very happy about this option of the early revolution. I also draw a tactic which I was happy about, the medieval army. Malakesh is willing to go for Saladin for 2 civil actions, builds the 2nd lab, and then uses the Engineering Genius. I think with having Homer, getting Saladin as a replacement, or generally any leader's replacement, is quite nice. On the other hand, he already took Engineering Genius for 2, now Saladin for 2, and at the next turn he can finish the Rome roads, elect Homer, and then only the turn after he can elect Saladin at the earliest, and then only at the turn after he will get his civil action, but nonetheless, doing all of this might still end up being quite fine, and so I think it's a fine call here to go for Saladin, but yeah, we also see that with the Rome roads being a 4-step wonder, it will still take actually quite a while until the Saladin will be able to get going. Kharny this turn builds the 3rd mine, gets his economy going, uses Cleo's extra resource to build a step of the Stonehenge, increases his population, and then just builds another step, so is using his civil actions very effectively. Now it's Brightfuture's turn. He seeds and opens the development of trade routes. That I was not too happy to see, because sadly with the additional resource revealed I can't really do the revolution and get out of corruption. If, for example, development of markets or agriculture would have been revealed, I could have taken 2 food and I could have still done the revolution and increased my population. But the problem with the development of trade routes is not only that I can't do the revolution without getting out of corruption, I actually have problems in general now to get out of corruption, because I can't increase my population, I can't build 2 stages of the library, and I might actually have some troubles at the next turn to get out of corruption. And with that, I was not too happy about that development being revealed. Brightfuture this turn, with the development of Dried Roots, can already go for the Code of Laws, which I think is quite strong. He builds the first step of the Colossus, takes the Rich Land and the Frugality. Now it's my turn, and I start my turn by actually seeding the Raiders, which is a bit questionable because I could very well end up losing it, but I was just hoping that maybe a development will be revealed that just helps me to go for a decent turn here. For example, 2 food would then again still allow me to just do the revolution, increase my population to get out of corruption. Development of settlement would at least allow me to build a warrior to get out of corruption and do the revolution. And development of civil life would allow me to increase my population and do the revolution. Development of crafts would at least allow me to maybe just finish the library and delay the revolution. I could finish the library and take the knight. So I think there are a lot of developments here that would be helpful for me. And with that, I was willing to put the raiders into the deck, hoping that it will improve my turn. Sadly, not one of the helpful developments is revealed, so I was a bit unhappy about that. At least I have a free population to take that free religion, and at least thanks to me having pushed, I will get a culture income a turn earlier, which makes a very, very small difference, but yeah, I rather would have preferred a lot of the other developments here. And then, of course, with none of the helpful developments being revealed, the question is, what do I do this turn? And as you can see, I end up still doing the revolution. However, I also highly considered to go for the irrigation, go for an upgrade, and then with the last 2 civil actions that I have thanks to Hammurabi, take the knights so that I have them in hand for my medieval army tactic. And I do think that could be a very fine decision. But then again, going for food upgrades that early can be fine, but is maybe also not the biggest boost economically. And so I think it would be a fine turn, but at the end I decided that an early revolution is so strong that it is still strong even when I have corruption. It would be a lot better if I would not have corruption, especially because now I am still missing a resource to finish the library at the next turn with having corruption, which is annoying. But yeah, at the end thought it's still just too strong to go for the revolution. I of course potentially am at the risk of missing out on knights, and that of course could definitely backfire, and maybe just because of that alone I should go for the irrigation. It would fix corruption and I would secure myself the knights. But at the end I decided to just still go for the early revolution, hoping that I will end up having another chance to take a copy of knights. With having Hammurabi plus the monarchy now, it would not be a problem for me maybe to take knights even for 3 civil actions if I have to. So at the end I was fine with not taking the knights here, but I was not too happy that sadly I have corruption in addition to the revolution. But of course, when I do the revolution, I have 1 civil action left. I could just build a step of the library, but I think there are some cards that are worthwhile considering. The irrigation could still be fine to take in hand. There's the Ocean Liner service for some synergy, the Statue of Liberty, and just in general having something in hand to upgrade to and to spend some civil actions on could still be fine. So I definitely considered going for the irrigation here. And it would be a fine pick. However, at the end I decided to rather go with the reserves, because as I said, sadly with having corruption now, I'm missing 1 resource to finish the library at the next turn, but with the reserves I can finish the library, which also allows me to maybe spend a lot of my civil actions effectively in case there aren't the most exciting cards in the row to take for me. And also, in case I don't need it, maybe there's a development reveal that helps me finishing the library. Then, with me having gone early into consumption, maybe also the 2 food could end up being very helpful to maybe put an additional worker into the military, and to, with that, maybe make me safer from potential aggressions or better prepared for strength events. I draw some cards, the Enslave and the Immigration. Malakesh offers a trade routes agreement to Brightfuture. Interestingly, he wants to be able to use resources as food. A bit speculative, but having this option could still turn out to be very nice. Brightfuture will be able to use food as resources. Malakesh finishes the Roman roads, gets additional resource income and an additional yellow token. And then with his last civil action, he elects Sumer so that at the next turn he maybe can then already elect Saladin. He also reveals the fighting band tactic. Kharny takes the monarchy, takes the knights, develops the monarchy, finishes the Stonehenge, so that looks like a very clean turn. Brightfuture seeds, opens the development of agriculture, he takes the free religion, uses the frugality and the other frugality, and then finishes the Colossus, takes another copy of frugality, so he has already taken 5 food just from yellow cards, which is quite funny, and then he has a civil action left and goes for the swordsman, scoring another science with Aristotle, having a military tech, so that sounds very reasonable. At my turn, I could, as I said the turn before, potentially take the knights for 3 civil actions here. However, I thought that I actually might have a reasonable chance to get them for cheaper at my next turn, because Malakesh, first of all, has the fighting band tactic revealed, and second of all, has some insane corruption issues, so him taking the knights for 2, especially when the swordsman will, with the turn that I will be going for now, drop down to 1 civil actions, I think he will definitely not take the knights. Kharny has the knights already, and Brightfuture has already the swordsman, and I thought there is maybe a chance that the knights could even stay on 2 for him, but even if they fall down to 1, maybe with having the swordsman in hand and the fighting band tactic revealed, maybe he won't take them. So I was here again being willing to risk missing out on the knights, which is a bit risky because the event deck is flipping, but it also would just be very costly to take them for 3 here. Even when I have this tactic, so I just skipped them here, and instead I played the resources, I finished the library, I increased my population to get out of corruption, and it leaves me with 1 civil action left. And here the question is, should I take one of those leaders, or just a yellow card, which then could maybe either be the urban growth or the cultural heritage. For the drama, I think there's not the biggest synergy, no Bach, no Marlene, there is Hollywood, Chaplin, Anthony Gaudi, so a little bit of synergy, but not enough for me to take it here in a 4-player game. I could just take one of those yellow cards, I think that could be fine, I could leave myself open for Nostradamus, potentially also those leaders could provide me with some nice value. But then again, Eleanor is a very nice follow-up for Hammurabi, because I can just keep her in hand for a while and then use her as a nice transitional leader. Joan of Arc could help me a little bit with the strength, I have the free religion, and I know that the raiders are coming, but I have already my 3rd military action, and I actually have the library, and if you have watched the video that I did recently, and not only talked about library plus Cleopatra, but I also talked about library plus Eleanor, because being able to keep an additional card in hand with Eleanor is just quite strong. So I have a 3rd military action, I have the library, I can use her as a transitional leader. I think Eleanor is just having some great potential here, and with that I decided to take her in hand. I draw the reds and the pestilence. Malakesh offers an open borders agreement to Kharny. And with that, the trade routes agreement that he offered a turn earlier actually gets cancelled. So he is doing some interesting pact stuff here. Malakesh takes the swordsman, as expected. He isn't going for the knights. He then increases his population a bunch of times and uses Homer's resources to build a warrior. Doesn't find a civil action to elect Saladin yet, but maybe the next turn at least again will be able to get a resource out of Homer. Kharny seeds, the development of civil life is revealed that allows him to increase his population, and then he takes the engineering genius and the cartography, and that I was actually very happy to see. It definitely might make sense for him, even though I think skipping the Code of Laws for 1 here is a bit expensive, instead taking those cards, but there's some colonization payoff. He has a lot of military actions, will get a lot of draws, and the engineering genius of course might help him finishing H1 wonder, so I think it might make sense for him. But for myself, I was very happy to see that, because first of all that means that the Code of Laws might be available for me, which is nice with my decent science income and getting it together with the monarchy. And additionally, Kharny takes those 2 cards which are on the right side of the knights, meaning now the knights stay in 2 civil actions for Brightfuture, making it quite likely that hopefully the knights will end up being available for me at my next turn. So I was quite happy when I saw this turn from Kharny. He also builds a warrior, reveals the fighting band to get a bit stronger. Brightfuture seeds, the development of crafts is revealed. He will develop the swordsman, takes the iron for 3 civil actions, can then maybe start upgrading to it at the next turn, and then he takes another copy of Richland, and now with that might be able to get those iron upgrades going very quickly. Now it's my turn. I decide to not push here. Those events, maybe the reds maybe could be interesting, but it could also be nice to get another population out, so I think those are not the most beneficial events for me, and generally I think it's beneficial for me to maybe slow the deck down a little bit. And of course, I will go for the knights here, and I was very happy that those are available because they are just in time now. Brightfuture went for the swordsman. I am definitely in danger of an aggression. If the knights wouldn't been available, I might have had some issues, but now I can go for the knights for one civil action, so that at the end worked out very nicely. I can build a knight, reveal the medieval army tactic. And now with Hammurabi, I have 4 civil actions left. And it was quite a tough choice for me here, because I thought that I very likely want to go for the iron here, because the next turn I might just be able to go for 2 upgrades, might get my economy running even more quickly. I have already a government form and at least 3 science income. I think in this situation the iron might just be a very nice choice, especially with a bunch of strong H2 wonders being in the game and also some H1 wonders still being available. So I think the iron is just quite strong here, and that was somewhat clear for me that I want to take the iron here. But then it gets a bit tricky, or of course you might just say, well, let's take the Code of Laws. You at some point will need it with the monarchy to get your 6th civil action, even when it takes a bit of time. It's not bad to just have it in hand and to make sure to not be stuck on 5 civil action when going into H3. And that's definitely true. But first of all, the thing is, if I take the Code of Laws, how am I using my last civil action on? Of course, I could just not use it and just take the 1 additional draw, but that's maybe not that valuable. Yeah, I don't really want to have any of those other cards, and I don't want to build any additional stuff here at the moment. I rather want to keep the population available for the military. So when I take the Code of Laws, I probably don't do anything else, and at least get 1 additional draw, which has some value attached to it, with maybe going for Eleanor the next turn. But the thing is, when I go for the iron at the next turn, I'm at 1+4, then at 1+3, so it takes 2 more turns very likely until I will end up going for the Code of Laws. And if I invest then 6 science into the Code of Laws, then it might take again a while until I can go into something like scientific method. So I have some decent science income, and as I said, maybe it is fine to just go for the Code of Laws quite a bit later, but I also felt like it's maybe just a bit too much of a science investment. And there's another strong card in the row that maybe is a bit cheaper science-wise, and that is the masonry, which I can also just take. And as I said, when I take the Code of Laws, I maybe don't take anything else. So the benefit that I'm getting over taking a masonry is 1 draw, but it does make a big difference here that the masonry is on 2 civil actions, because it basically just makes the difference of getting an additional draw. And when I go for the masonry, then I could go for the iron at the next turn, and already the masonry in 2 turns, and then 2 turns after that, when we are in H2, I would be prepared to go into scientific method, and I have some science available to do some stuff. Additionally, there are still 2 wonders from H1 available that work very nicely with the masonry, the Great Wall and the Silk Road. So with now going for the iron, when those wonders are available at a nice time, I very well might go for them. And then in H2, as said, there are some other wonders where the masonry could do some very nice work. So I actually at the end decided to pick the masonry here over the Code of Laws, because it's cheaper, because I felt like I can play the game a bit more smoothly with the technology being cheaper, and with, I think, there just being a lot of potential. I haven't upgraded any urban buildings yet, and with those wonders being in the game, I think there's a good potential for me to get quite some nice value out of the masonry. I don't draw any cards. I think I also thought a little bit about the Forbidden City, but for that I would need to sacrifice the iron, which at the end I wasn't willing to do. Malakesh, interestingly, takes the Michi Castle. One thing that I didn't like that much about the decision of not taking the Code of Laws is that Malakesh might be able to get it. He had some science lying around going into his turn, but he decides to rather go for the Michi Castle, which he will be able to finish at the next turn, but it also means that he again delays Saladin, so it will now be quite a while until he finally gets the additional civil action, but at least he every turn can get an additional resource out of Homer, and at the next turn he can finish Imichi Castle, upgrade another warrior, and then he has a very decent amount of strength to work with, and it might be enough to actually make him the strongest going into the first round of H1 events. Kharny this turn will go for Genghis Khan. There would have been Nostradamus with 4 military actions. It's a very strong leader, so with him going for Genghis Khan, I think it's clear that he has a decent tactic for him to work with. He goes for the alchemy to use Cleo's resources one last time, then gets out of corruption by building a warrior, and indeed he has the heavy cavalry tactic, goes for that warrior, and there's also a great wall coming down the road. He has the engineering genius, so that maybe also might be a reason why he went for Genghis Khan and not Nostradamus. Brightfuture doesn't see it, instead he goes for Nostradamus, replaces Aristotle, takes the Forbidden City, and develops the Iron, as well as upgrading a warrior to Swordsman. Now it is my turn. I decide to go for 2 Iron upgrades. At the moment I don't need to build an additional knight. For the military, of course the event deck might flip, but even if I build an additional knight, I am still the weakest, and so I was just willing to rather go for 2 upgrades here. I think I will also decide to elect Eleanor here, and as you can see I actually decide that Hammurabi will give me the civil action back, which of course has to do with what I have planned for the rest of my turn. And here it was a bit of a decision on how do I want to get an additional happy phase, because if I don't get an additional happy phase, I think I might be quite a bit in danger, because there's a chance that the age ends before my next turn, and then sadly I will be stuck at 3 food and I won't be able to get an additional population out. There are some developments that could help me, like development of settlement, markets, and also there's planning, so there's some decent chance that I get an additional population out, but regardless of whether I get an additional population out or not, the happy phase is useful, because if I get an additional population out, if I then will be able to get an additional happy phase from somewhere, then I will be able to go for another army, which then is maybe enough to avoid being the weakest and be somewhat nicely prepared to go into the strength events. However, if I don't get an additional population out because the age ends and there's no helpful development revealed, then if I don't get an additional happy phase, I actually won't be able to put any more unit into the military without destroying something, and that could leave me quite vulnerable, because Malakesh will go up to 11 strength, and yeah, so that would be quite dangerous. And there were 2 ways how I considered getting the additional happy phase. With one option, I would have taken a military action from Hammurabi. I would have used that to elect Eleanor in order to have 3 civil actions left now, and then I would have taken the Great Wall, which generally looked like a quite appealing option, because I have this masonry in hand, I can finish the Great Wall quite efficiently, and I have now some iron production going. But the thing is just that the Great Wall, it might be a bit too slow here, because Malakesh already at the next turn will likely go up to 11, maybe even more strength, if for example development of markets are revealed. So he is already will be quite threatening very soon. And at the next turn I won't have enough resource to finish the Great Wall, only in 2 turns, and in 2 turns if I don't get any help from events, will have enough resource to finish the Great Wall, but not build anything in addition to that. So I won't be able to build any more units and the Great Wall. So the Great Wall I think is quite a strong wonder in 3 and 4 player games, but here I just felt like it is too slow, and at the end I decided to rather go for patriotism and theology, because that allows me to fix my happy phases with upgrading this religion. There is actually PR in the game, but I think in this situation it's just crucial that I can put an additional work into the military. Of course I could also destroy the religion and build an arena, but it's just very inefficient. So despite PR being the game, I rather went for the theology here. It allows me to upgrade this religion, and then I can, if I get an additional population, go for another army, and if not, at least build 1 more knight, which could make a difference between me being safe from aggressions or not. And the patriotism also allows me to potentially at the next turn even upgrade this and build another army. So that at the end felt just like the better way for me, and while I don't get the Great Wall, at least I leave myself open either for the Silk Road or also for those strong H2 wonders that might be revealed. I get also 3 draws for Eleanor, draw some more events, so I have some events to choose from for the next turn. Malakesh seeds, the event deck flips finally, the development of settlement is revealed. He will now elect Saladin. It took a while, but at least he got some additional resources out of Homer. He can upgrade 1 more warrior to swordsman, finishes the Michi Castle. Also with the development of settlement being revealed, I will indeed now have enough population, also thanks to being able to upgrade this religion, to go for another army, which I was happy to see, which gives me maybe a chance to not be the weakest. A downside of not taking the Great Wall was that now Kharny gets access to it, and I think for him the Great Wall is quite strong. He has some warriors, he has Genghis Khan, and that can make him quite dangerous. I was very happy to see, though, that he actually cancels the open borders agreement here. Not sure why he does this. Of course, Malakesh is now back to 2 military actions, so that's a bit painful for him. Maybe Kharny was afraid of an aggression, but I do think maybe you should just take the risk. Of course, it could backfire, but yeah. So maybe he just didn't want to be in danger of an aggression. I sometimes am just willing to take the risk here and keep the additional military action because it's just so useful. But he maybe decided to play it safe here. But with going for the cartography, he only would have needed 1 defense card if he would have had an additional military action. But also Malakesh would have had a +2 bonus. So I think it's very unlikely that Malakesh goes for an aggression. Him sacrificing going for an H1 aggression, I think, is also very unlikely, because sacrificing units is actually quite a big price to pay, and the rewards of an H1 aggression are often not even big enough to justify sacrificing that unit, because it costs a population, which costs then again 3 or 4 food to get it back. It costs some resources to rebuild a unit if you want to rebuild it, and that's often already more cost than the value that an aggression offers. Not taking into account, of course, that you also hit one of your opponents, but that's not the biggest factor in a 4-player game. At least compared to the other player counts, it's of course still a factor. Kharny then prepares himself to finish the Great Roller. The next turn, actually, he builds this warrior. Maybe he just wanted to Malakesh to be back on 2 military actions, because apart from sacrificing, he would be safe from an aggression, and soon he will be safe anyway. And I think sacrificing is very unlikely, especially if the aggression isn't even safe. So I'm a bit. I think I would have kept this open borders agreement pact. Brightfuture seeds, and I was happy to see that there's no strength event. There's a colony instead, and here I do a bit of a consequential decision. I decide to secure myself that colony at the cost of an army. I will be able to rebuild quite a bunch of stuff, and getting those 2 yellow tokens in the free population is of course quite nice. But building an army is also quite expensive, and with the strength that my opponents have, also could backfire, especially because even if I rebuild my strength now, will be in danger of a potential aggression from Malakesh. So that could definitely backfire. But then on the other hand, there's Suez Canal and Cook in the game, and if those cards are in the game, it can just be extremely important to secure yourself a colony, making sure that the others don't have a colony yet, so that you have better chances to go for the Suez Canal and open yourself up for a very strong wonder. But here it was a very close call for me. I also thought maybe I will just not bid by that. Then I also thought maybe at least I make it more expensive for one of my opponents, and if I win it, it's still somewhat fine for me because I can rebuild and I have this colony available. But at my next turn, if I don't win this colony, would have had a chance to go for another army, going up to 10 strength and be maybe somewhat safe. Now I will be quite weak and potentially could get even hit by an aggression from Malakesh, who at least at his turn will have to sacrifice some H2 draws for it, and at least I can go up to an amount of strength where I could defend with 2 H1 defense cards. I can seed at my turn, getting some additional draws, and even if I have 2 H1 defense cards, I wouldn't have been able to win this colony for 1 unit, because a knight plus those 2 cards would be 4. So even if I have 2 cards in hand, it still makes sense that I now would send an army. So for Malakesh, it's not the safe aggression, and he loses some H2 draws. And at the end, I was willing to take the risk. But that could definitely backfire, and yeah, we will see how that goes. Brightfuture upgrades his 2 mines, has at the next turn exactly enough resources to finish the Forbidden City, takes the breakthrough, increases his population, builds a step, so a very efficient turn for him. Now it's my turn. I'm of course the weakest. There could be some annoying stuff revealed, but I just wanted to give myself the chance to maybe draw an additional colonization card to actually be safe from an aggression, unless Malakesh is willing to sacrifice. But as I said, sacrificing is quite costly, so I didn't see this as a big risk. I decide to push the reds into the deck here. Those could definitely backfire. Maybe I should have just pushed the Knowledge of the Ancients here, but I felt like I have already a government form. Other players have all 2 wonders, I have only 1. so maybe that's just too helpful. I didn't want to push a strength event. The Pestilence after sacrificing army would be quite bad, and maybe I can at least prepare nicely for the reds. So at the end I pushed that, but yeah, maybe I could have also pushed something else, but all of the other events also have some drawbacks. I was happy to see that I don't get punished yet, and the Dark Ages are revealed, which is actually quite nice for me as I don't lose any science. Malakesh loses 3, he still needs to get to the government form, so that's quite a setback for him. And in this turn I played a patriotism, I built another army, I built this warrior. With that I only need 2 defense cards to defend myself against Malakesh. I was hoping that with that, and especially with, as I said, sending an army for the colony would still make sense even if I have 2 colonization cards. So I was hoping that maybe even if he has an aggression, he doesn't try it, especially with me having had quite a bunch of draws and now even some additional draws with Eleanor, and I will even get 1 more draw. So I was willing to build this warrior, but there is definitely the danger that I get punished here. Then I have 4 civil actions left. I could take the Silk Road here, but it takes a while until I can finish it, and at this point I rather wanted to leave myself open for those H2 wonders, especially now that I was able to win a colony, and now that the Suez Canal could actually end up being an interesting option for me. And so instead, I increase my population here, I take the reserves and the Ridgeland, so just some yellow cards. Ridgeland allows me to upgrade this mine while still being able to build another knight at the next turn. When I build this knight, I hopefully will be safe again. And the reserves could just help me getting another population out, or just help me with getting 2 additional resources. Of course, you could argue that I should either take irrigation or alchemy instead of those yellow cards. Irrigation could be nice if I get the ocean liner service, and generally with my decent yellow bank, I can maybe just go for irrigation instead of selective breeding. And that definitely could be true. I could also go for the alchemy together with the masonry, but I felt that the next turn I will be able to upgrade plus build a knight, and then in 2 turns there will be a lot of H2 stuff available. There are some strong wonders, there could be scientific method, there could be selective breeding. So at this point I was just hoping that there will be some decent stuff to invest into from H2. Of course it could still be nice to just take the irrigation in hand in case I get the ocean liner, but those reserves in the rich land also just might help me finishing those wonders maybe a bit more quickly. And at the end I was then fine with taking those cards. Reserves could also help me maybe getting another population out before reds are revealed. So yeah, I think it's at the end fine to just take those yellow cards, but especially irrigation I think also would have been a valid pick here. But I think it's fine to skip the alchemy here because there should be enough good stuff from H2 to invest into. As you can see, I don't draw an H1 card, H2 starts, and of course now I was hoping that Malakesh doesn't try an aggression. But as you can see, sadly he does. He doesn't sacrifice and gets 2 resources while I sadly lose a lab. Malakesh, thanks to the additional resources, will be able to go for 2 alchemy upgrades, so it does give him an economical boost. He then also takes the irrigation in hand. Kharny seeds, and the border conflict is revealed, so sadly in addition to losing the lab I have to destroy 1 other thing, so it's definitely piling up here a little bit. Kharny this turn finishes the Great Wall, sadly missed out in the border conflict for himself, would have been the strongest now, takes the wave of nationalism, interestingly. Decides to skip the iron for now. Brightfuture seeds, now the event reveal is revealed that I have seeded, so for that of course I have myself to blame, but I also think it was reasonable to try to prevent corruption when I did the revolution. If it would have prevented corruption, then I would have now just lost what I would have gained, but I would have had those things available earlier, which might have helped me snowballing, so I think it was very well worth a shot, and at least 1 other player also loses some stuff here, in this case Malakesh. But, yeah, of course it's not great. Brightfuture finishes the Forbidden City, takes the breakthrough and the knights. And now it's my turn, and I have to decide whether to push here. I am of course still the weakest, and with that I can potentially again get punished by a strength event, but then on the other hand there are also already quite a bunch of strength events out, so with that I was hoping that maybe there aren't the biggest strength events left, and then also I think that 2 additional draws at the beginning of H2 are just very strong. For example, the Colossus, I think it is just generally accepted those that getting those additional draws at the beginning of the age are just quite valuable. You might find an early tactic. Drawing certain events can really dictate in which direction you want to take the game. You can draw wars and aggression and stuff. I could, for example, draw a colony for potential Suez Canal, and with me valuing those draws quite highly, and with a bunch of strength events being already out, I decided to push. However, there's also a big reason against pushing here, because I was eyeing that Napoleon here. If I don't take him, I will just stay the weakest for quite a while longer, while if I take him, I might even be the strongest for a while. So he immediately will put me from weakest to strongest, and with such a big switch in my strength incoming, maybe I should just be a bit cautious and not push. But then again, there are a lot of strength events already out. At the end, I decided that I want to get the additional draws from Eleanor, despite me planning on going for Napoleon here. And let's see how that worked out for me. I pushed the Pestilence, and the Uncertain Borders are revealed. So I do get quite heavily punished here. And that event is actually quite annoying. I had knowledge about the Call to Arms, because if that event potentially would have been in the deck, I think then I wouldn't have seeded, because that could have been a disaster, because what is on the row, as you can see, is actually an early ocean liner service, and if I would have been at the risk of losing 2 civil actions, I think I wouldn't have pushed. That is maybe the second worst event I could hit, because sadly now I'm in that area of my Leonberg, and that has some further consequences for my turn, because before that event was revealed, my plan was to, instead of now losing a lab to the border conflict, to just lose a farm. With me getting the ocean liner service, that shouldn't be too bad. I could take the ocean liner and at some point just rebuild the farm whenever it pleases me. I also thought about just losing a mine and then building an iron mine directly. The problem with that is that I kind of want to upgrade this mine and build a knight to get stronger, but if I have to rebuild a mine, I either don't rebuild a mine for a turn and build a knight, or I don't build a knight, but it makes even then, the difference between being weakest or strongest, and maybe now that the Uncertain Borders are out, it could be fine, but it still didn't feel too great. And so at the end, as you can see, I decided to lose the second lab here, but yeah, now I really got hit by a series of quite bad stuff. First losing a lab to the raid, losing a second lab now to the border conflict, losing stuff to the raiders, and now a yellow token to the Uncertain Borders, which definitely harms my turn here. The last one, of course, is somewhat my fault. It's my decision to push, but yeah, still I was of course not too happy about what I had to suffer through in this last round. And with that event on top, of course, I rather would have liked to not have seeded here, but I still think it was reasonable to seed. But I do get punished, and I will still, even now that the strength event is out, go for Napoleon, because I was a bit worried that if I don't take him, stuff could actually get a bit dangerous for me, and there might even still be 1 or 2 strength events coming, so I decide to go for Napoleon here. I replace Eleanor. She has indeed now worked out as a nice transitional leader. Her additional draws sadly weren't that helpful, and she even somewhat pushed me into pushing into a bad event. I go for Napoleon, and then of course I will go for the ocean liner. I will upgrade my mine with the rich land, and I will build a knight, which sadly means that I can't finish the ocean liner service at the next turn, but it's fine. I can finish it in 2 turns, I can finish it with the masonry, which is nice, and thanks to me going for the ocean liner service, I was also willing to push the pestilence at the beginning of my turn, because now I thought it should be quite nice to hit this event. Also the reds in the deck are now looking quite fine for me. So I got hit by a lot of bad stuff, but I do get this early ocean liner service, and that maybe makes up for at least partly some of that stuff that happened to me. So I was on one hand, of course, unhappy, on the other hand, also happy. Maybe if the Uncertain Borders wouldn't have happened, I would have been happy. But now the overall feeling after this turn was rather, ooh, I lost 2 labs here, with +1 science, and things is definitely looking a bit tricky, but at least for now I'm the strongest. Which is a bit annoying, because I could have actually won the yellow token here, but yeah, but it happened how it happened here. I draw a colony, that could be important for the Suez Canal. Also war, maybe with Napoleon, that could be interesting. Also a colonization card. Malakesh gets an early coal here, so that's nice for him. Kharny seeds and opens the cultural influence. So that could have also been revealed at my turn, but yeah, of course, I just took some risk. The cultural influence doesn't change too much. Then Kharny takes the cannons. That's an important technology for him with having the Great Wall. He goes for an upgrade to a lab, takes the rich land. He decided to skip the iron at the turn before, rather went for the wave of nationalism, so now he prepares himself to get into coal. Sadly for him, the first copy of coal was already taken away by Malakesh. And I do actually still get rewarded for increasing my strength with Napoleon, Brightfuture seeds, and I'm actually part of the fray, which I was very happy to see. Brightfuture gets this early copy of Scientific Method, and he not only takes that, but also the journalism away, which I was a bit unhappy to see, and maybe that's also a small hate draft here, because with me having lost those 2 labs, I thought, well, maybe just building journalism from scratch, maybe after finishing the ocean liner, could be quite strong. But yeah, Brightfuture, at least for now, denies me that option and sadly also takes the Scientific Method away. Now it's my turn. And I, for a moment, actually thought about potentially declaring a war with technology here against Brightfuture, because he has Nostradamus, and his strength doesn't help for wars, and he could be vulnerable. But he also has enough science for cannons, he could have defensive army tactic, there could be a promise of military protection pact, so in case I kinda would need to maybe, yeah, maybe even build an army, but that's not really easily possible, but at least 1 knight, but then it could still backfire, so at the end it just felt too risky for me, and instead I decided to rather seed, and with me now going down to +1 science income and still needing some investments to do like the masonry, and at least now having an additional wonder, I thought the knowledge of the ancients should end up being a very nice event for me, so I push, but sadly now again a bad event is revealed, and that is still a consequence of the uncertain borders. So I'm a little bit in, yeah, there's a little bit of negative snowballing happening to me, if that even makes sense. But yeah, because of having lost the yellow tokens to the uncertain borders, I have this unhappy worker now, which I otherwise wouldn't have had, and now I lose 2 civil actions, meaning that the uncertain borders at the end were even more painful. And maybe because of that I shouldn't have risked to that one particular event, but yeah, there could have been a lot of other events, and even some other strength events I wouldn't have been too unhappy about losing them, but the uncertain borders at the end were quite bad. If the rebellion would have been revealed here, I think I then would have maybe just played the reserves, developed the masonry, finished the ocean liner, taken the revolutionary idea. I think that would have been a very clean turn. I could have gotten the ocean liner service going this turn, but maybe it could have been even a bit bad to go for this turn, because after I seeded, and I did this decision somewhat quickly because I'm the strongest and it's just a useful event, but after I lost those civil actions, I thought I came to the conclusion that this justice system is actually an extremely important technology here. Generally, of course, if you have the monarchy, you want to go up to 6 civil actions, and I'm not the only player who really wants to have the justice system. There's maybe even a player who needs it even more than I do and who has more science to work with, and that is Kharny. Malakesh maybe could go for it, but probably not. But Kharny has a lot of science lying around, is on 5 civil actions, and if I leave him the justice system, he will quickly go up to 6, while I will be stuck on 5, potentially for quite a while. While now I will be able to go up to 6, and Kharny is the one who very likely will be stuck on 5 civil actions for quite a while. So I think this justice system is quite swingy here, and I maybe should have taken it also when the rebellion wouldn't have been revealed, and should have been willing to delay the ocean liner service here. And at least the rebellion helped me realizing that. Otherwise, maybe I could have just gone for a quick turn with finishing ocean liner service, because that felt just like a very straightforward clean turn, and maybe it also would have been a clean turn, but I do think the justice system, securing myself that copy, could end up being quite important, and now with the rebellion revealed and me not having enough civil actions to finish the ocean liner, I at the end decided to go for the justice system to develop it, and then of course I really need this revolutionary idea, and also the knowledge of the ancients might end up being very important those two additional ways of getting some additional science might allow me to go for the masonry and then still hopefully go for either the scientific method or journalism to finally get some science production back. But my plan was now to finish the ocean liner service at the next turn. Sadly, I'm missing a science to develop the masonry normally. Could have maybe even thought about building a second lab instead of taking the revolutionary idea, because there's the Harvard College coming down the row, and because of having to play the revolutionary idea before being able to develop the masonry, I won't have enough civil actions to take it at the next turn. And yeah, but it might be taken away by my opponents anyway, so I decided to not play too much around it. I draw some cards, another colonization card. That could be nice if maybe another colony is coming, and Kharny did pay some civil actions to get into this cartography. Malakesh takes the selective breeding, wants to have that over the irrigation, and also builds an additional swordsman, making it that he isn't the weakest any longer. Kharny seeds, and the pestilence is revealed. He has to destroy something, will lose the religion. For Malakesh, it might actually mean that he has an uprising issue, so that event is doing some work. Only Brightfuture is very well prepared for it, and I with the Ocean Liner service, of course, as well. Kharny is interestingly switching to the phalanx tactic, which allows him to then play the Wave of Nationalism for 4 instead of only 2 resources, so an interesting maneuver by him here. And also, of course, long term, the phalanx tactic might be better for him to use than the heavy cavalry tactic when he switches out of Genghis Khan. So an interesting maneuver, and he makes sure to be the strongest. Brightfuture takes this copy of cannons, takes the rifleman, he develops the cannons, takes the conmon, maybe can even do a revolution at the next turn potentially, and he skips the Harvard College, so I might have been able to take it, but sadly now I won't be able to. I see the Crusades into the deck. I'm still one of the 2 strongest, and I at least thought there's maybe a chance that I could end up winning the Crusades, and I was hoping that the risk of me losing it is not that big, so I decided to push here. And I also thought it could maybe be nice. I have those colonization cards. If I reveal a colony now, maybe now it could be a nice time for it to be revealed. And if I should end up winning even another colony, the Suez Canal that is still lurking in the deck could actually end up being quite strong for me. So I push, and there's actually a strong colony revealed, and I was extremely happy to see that I actually am able to win it for just a single night. And I think I was even willing to just send an army and all of my cards away. I really wanted to secure myself that strong colony. I don't need it that much maybe with having the ocean liner service, but it's still strong, and if I secure myself that, I'm still the only player with colonies, but I have 2 colonies now, I have a colony in hand, so the Suez Canal could end up being very strong for me, and I was extremely happy to see that I even win it for just 1 unit here, so having had a decent amount of draws did at least maybe help me winning now this vast territory. And in this turn I played the revolutionary idea, developed the masonry, finished the ocean liner service, get the population, build a knight, increase my population again because the reds are coming, and then I have 1 civil action left, which I will actually use to just play the reserves resources. I can of course take the efficient upgrade, but now that I have even more additional yellow tokens, I just maybe for a very long time, maybe for the rest of the game, won't need any farm upgrades. If I go for scientific method, I just might build them from scratch. Of course, I might be able to go for an organized religion, so maybe I could take the efficient upgrade, but at the end I just rather use the reserves that I had in hand for 2 resources instead of taking a card that might just be stuck in hand for quite a while for me. I draw another colonization card and some tactics. Malakesh this turn goes for the Republic, has just enough science to develop it. Is now very high on civil actions, but still stuck on 2 military actions, so Kharny cancelling the Open Borders Agreement did certainly do some damage to Malakesh. He takes some yellow cards and the Organized Religion. Now it's Kharny's turn. He seeds and opens the reds, which I at the end lose even the most food to, but it's not too bad with having the Ocean Liner service and such a big yellow bank. Kharny uses the opportunity of the reds being out of the deck to just go for 1 selective breeding upgrade. It's somewhat expensive, but yeah, maybe the other things that he could do at this turn weren't that great. Brightfuture goes for Antoni Gaudi and replaces him. He was also the one who seeded its H2 event. Of course, with Nostradamus, he also would have had knowledge if one of the others would have seeded it, but we will see that his decision of going for Anthony Gaudi is connected to the H2 event that is coming. So he elects Anthony Gaudi, goes for the team spot, saving some science immediately, building one, getting a bit stronger, building a swordsman, so that he's the weakest, takes the reserves and a patriotism. Now it's my turn, and I decide to push here again, and I actually push the economic progress, which oftentimes when you have the ocean liner service isn't maybe the best event to push, because the food side of this event oftentimes is just bad for you. Sometimes even you could get hit by famine or something if the timing is bad. In this situation probably not, but still it probably won't help me in any sense with the population income. It might help in that sense my opponents more. But first of all, I have this justice system and so some additional blue tokens, which hopefully helps me to get at least more resources out of that event. And this turn I will also decide, with me having so much population, to just build a fourth mine. So I go up to 8 resource income, and then additionally, with it already getting late in H2, with me still being the only player having colonies, I thought that I have a decent chance of getting the Suez Canal. It might not be taken away, and then I will go for even more resource income, and then I thought this event has just some big potential. There are 2 H1 events coming before that, so I might have time even until I get the Suez Canal, and then hopefully after that it will be revealed. But yeah, I thought I might get that many resources out of it that it's worthwhile seeding for me, even though I might not get any additional food out of it. And now we can see why Brightfuture went for Anthony Gaudi. There's an early iconoclasm revealed, which does cause 2 of my opponents their leader, and at least 1 round maybe of benefits, also maybe the civil actions for replacing them, so that is some real damage here to Malakesh and Kharny. And then, as said, I will definitely build an additional mine here. I think that is something that kind of has to be done here. I sadly don't have enough science yet to go for either journalism or scientific method. I could just build an HA lab, but I rather decided to just soon build one of those buildings directly. I could still build an HA lab. I actually also consider to just build a 5th mine here, and it might not be too bad actually here. But the thing is, I wanted to leave myself with enough resources to just take and finish the Suez at the next turn, to be able to finish that as quickly as possible and have that also running hopefully before the economic progress is revealed. And I would probably be willing to delay my science income even for another turn. At least the knowledge of the ancients will help me a little bit with that. And at this point I might be H3, so maybe at this point there's even a chance that I can get into computers or multimedia directly. So with that, I wanted to leave myself open to take and finish the Suez Canal. If he is in the 1 or 2 civil action area, I will be able to do it, and I will actually take a bunch of cards from the row, so I thought it's not unlikely that it will be available for me in this spot at the next turn. So I, because of that, don't build an HA lab, I don't build a 5th mine, which I think would have been a fun play, and it might still be very reasonable here, but because of that reason of going for the Suez Canal, I decided to not go for it, and then for the rest of my turn I take a happy face solution. Maybe I won't need it that much when I go for the Suez Canal with the historic territory, but at some point I might still need it, and it's available for 1 civil action, so I decide to take it. I take the reserves as well, and then it is a bit of a decision here whether I want to go for the scientific method or the journalisms. It's quite late, and just building labs from scratch is maybe not the most efficient, and I kind of would prefer to go into journalism. On the other hand, my science is that low that maybe the additional science income could still be worthwhile, and the scientific methods are available for cheaper. And if I take the journalisms, it's a bit questionable how I should actually use my last civil actions, while if I take the scientific method, I can take this urban growth in addition to that, so at the end it just felt a lot smoother. If both of those technologies would have been available for 1 civil action for me, I think then I might have ended up taking the journalisms, but maybe even in that case the scientific method could be better, because there are some interesting lab leaders in H3, especially Bill Gates of course, so maybe even then the scientific method could still be the correct choice. But like this, I wasn't willing, definitely, to not I was not willing to pay an additional civil action here to get the journalisms. And I take a bunch of cards, and I was hoping that at the next turn I will be able to go for the Suez Canal and that no one will take it away from me. I draw some cards, the wealthy territory, so another option for my Suez Canal, also the Napoleonic army tactic, which has quite some potential if I at some point get the right technologies for it. Malakesh lost Saladin to the Iconoclast and will now go for Darwin, but lost the civil action from Saladin, won't get the civil action back, so that is some cost for him. But with Darwin at least he will get the cannons, he also develops the strategy. With spending the science and strategy, he doesn't get the bread and circuses going, meaning he will have to work with the organized religion. There's even Pierre in the game, so I do think that is quite a big cost for him. Team sports is already gone, so maybe he could have also found a turn where he goes for the bread and circuses, but then again, the strategy makes the difference between him being weakest or strongest. Kharny takes the cavalryman. As you can see, the Suez Canal is now revealed. For Kharny, it's definitely too expensive to take it. He goes for a cavalryman, builds one to get the tactic back, even now after having lost Genghis Khan, is now the strongest, takes the urban growth and the opera. Brightfuture could push. H3 starts, he also gets some draws from the Colossus. There's the danger of me getting hit by the Crusades, which could be a bit annoying, but I was happy to see, I'm not happy to see that I'm not part of this pact, but at least I don't get hit by the Crusades, which is something. International trade agreement is revealed, and Brightfuture actually wants to have some additional food, and that might indeed maybe be the more important part for him here, with otherwise it being quite slow until he can get more population out. Kharny will get the additional resource income. Brightfuture this turn will start going for some food upgrades. Now he can play the reserves to increase his population at the next turn, but he actually plays it for resource already this turn to go for second upgrade, which I think makes probably sense. And then at the next turn maybe he can also finally go for this constitutional monarchy. Now it's my turn. I decide to not push. Mainly because, first of all, the events that I can push, it's not that clear how nice they will be for me. I didn't really want to push a colony in there, despite me now going for the Suez Canal. The strength event is not that clear. I might lose Napoleon at some point. Terrorism is definitely not looking great, so my events are just not that great. But there's also the argument that my science is so low, so every additional science that I might get could be nice, and with that it might very much be worthwhile to see the knowledge of the ancients, which is one of those two H1 events revealed after I have gone for the Suez Canal. I could also push and try to get the knowledge of the ancients out, and then I could start by going for scientific method or even computers. I could maybe decide to even skip the Suez Canal here and just go for computers. But then again, there's an economic progress coming. I think the Suez Canal is just way too strong here. So I decided to not push and to just take and finish the Suez Canal. The question is, which colony do I want to colonize? Historic territory in some scenarios maybe not being the greatest colony to get for a Suez Canal, but I think in this particular scenario, I think it's extremely strong. Probably autonomous or developed territory because of the additional science would have been better, but arguably after that maybe it's already the best colony, because with having the ocean liner service, it does make a big difference whether I get additional yellow tokens or if I just get more happy phases. I get one population out per turn anyway. Of course, if I get inhabited or vast, I get even more population. But for the moment, I have enough population anyway, so the additional population might not be needed that much. So the happy phase is just extremely useful. And then I get 11 culture, which can be quite significant. It makes it that I'm quite in touch with Kharny. At the end of his turn, we can also take a look at the overview. And at the end I felt just it's too strong to go for the historic here, and the additional resources from the wealthy territory are not that much needed, especially with an economic progress coming. So I finished the Suez Canal, I colonized the historic territory, and then with my last civil action I played the reserves for resources so that I can build a knight to not be the weakest, because the other H1 event is the Crusades. I could even build another warrior to maybe even win the Crusades, but I was not willing to sacrifice an H3 draw here. And then at the next turn I can either go for scientific method, or I can maybe hope that either multimedias or computers are available to go for an even better solution. I draw an early war together with the Napoleonic army tactic. If I should quickly maybe get into something like modern infantry and rockets, that could maybe be an interesting thing. Malakesh goes for the organized religion. He could have gone for Mandela this turn. He could have also gone for the professional sports, but decides against that, takes the computers. which he doesn't have enough science for to go already at the next turn, but maybe wants to take away from his opponents, and then takes Efficient Upgrade and Breakthrough. Kharny Seeds and opens the Knowledge of the Ancients. Those 4 additional science are extremely valuable for me. And Kharny has now a strong option available. There's a very early oil, there's James Watt, increases his population, and then he interestingly develops the cannons as a last civil action. And soon he will be able to get very cheaply into oil, and that could give his position quite a big boost. Because before that I was a bit skeptical about his position. He is low in civil actions. Now my justice system part hate draft is definitely showing some consequences here. I think it makes a big difference now whether he is on 5 or 6 civil actions, and he will still have some issues, but getting cheaply into oil here could certainly jumpstart his economy quite a bit, and at least for the moment he's still having the culture lead, and with oil will also getting 5 additional culture at some point from James Watt. An interesting choice to develop the cannons, and I think a relatively clear hand towards the arms industry, or potentially the freedom of movement, but with me having drawn the defensive army tactic earlier, I thought it's rather a sign that maybe the arms industry is coming soon. Otherwise, I think just electing James Watt might have made more sense, but with that event, developing the cannons might be reasonable. He is skipping the early air forces, and we can also take a look now, as said, at the overview. Kharny is having the culture lead. Nonetheless, if it would not be for James Watt in the oil, I thought his position would be quite fragile. Now, if he gets that going, I think it has quite some potential, but still he could have some issues because of his low civil action count and maybe not having enough science to easily go into an H3 government form. Brightfuture has the second least culture, can now go into Conmon, has a decent economy, everything of his production is fine, but because of being relatively deep in his yellow bank, he maybe won't get the most population out. At least he still has the Forbidden City, so all of the population will be happy for a while, but I know that he doesn't have defensive armies, so maybe militarily he is for the moment not that threatening, and so he has maybe a fine position, but not really extraordinarily strong. While my position has definitely some weaknesses, I still need to fix my science income, but at least I will be able to do that soon. But I have the second most culture, I have 11 resource income, and soon there will be an economic progress coming, and I have this ocean liner service, meaning I have tons of population available. So despite of the series of bad events that I got hit by earlier, I at this point felt somewhat confident about my position and thought that I stabilized quite nicely. Also with me, of course, being quite lucky to secure myself those 2 insanely strong H2 wonders. So with those 2 boats, you oftentimes are just in a strong position. And yeah, so with that, I felt like I maybe have even the strongest position, but I also still have some weaknesses. Only being in 6 civil actions at some point could be bad. So yeah, I definitely have some weaknesses. And Malakesh has a nice amount of civil actions. Thanks to the knowledge of the ancients, he sadly will now be able to go for computers already the next turn. So sadly, that event helped him quite a bit now. And then he will be able to go for computers. Elective breeding has also quite a bunch of resource income. And with that, I felt like Malakesh might have potentially be the second best position, but then again, with Kharny getting James Watt in oil, he also might potentially have the second best, or maybe even best position. I think it's still relatively close. Every player, I think, is not out of the game for certain, but with my plus 11 here, and the ocean liner, and now being able to fix my science, I felt somewhat comfortable, but I also still, of course, need some military tech, so that's another thing that could be problematic for me. Brightfuture this turn can go for the Conmon. Now, of course, he is having quite a nice amount of civil actions. He also gets the first copy of Air Forces. He also interestingly takes the internet. There's maybe a chance he gets Pierre, and he just makes sure to have a wonder available, and a wonder that also has quite some potential in case the game stays more peaceful. I this turn seed the international negotiations into the deck. I'm not sure, I think I might even get stronger this turn and maybe could have had a chance to win the Crusades, but then I would have missed out on seeding, which also gives me 2 culture, and there's maybe a chance that just one of my opponents could get stronger again before the Crusades are revealed. So instead I just pushed something into the deck. I will secure myself one of those military techs this turn, and with that I was hoping that I might have a reasonable chance to win the international negotiations later on. So I push, the Crusades are out, I'm not part of that. Kharny will now get some additional culture stone from Brightfuture. I get a population from the Ocean Liner service. I could potentially think about paying extra civil actions for Mandela, but I want to get one of those military techs and I want to fix my science this turn, and both of those things I at the end valued more highly than getting Mandela here. And so I instead go for the scientific method. Sadly, neither multimedia or computers on the row, but I still think I need to finally get this going. I can get up to +7. I actually built another warrior. There could be some other strength events coming, and I have a free military action that I can use. As said, I could have also not seeded. Maybe I would have been able to win the Crusades. I'm not sure if it was correct to seed here, but at the end I just rather wanted to push and get some more knowledge for later on. And then I decide to take the modern infantry here, which wasn't clear. First I rather thought maybe I should go for rockets. At least I can use this tactic outdated. Building a rocket gives me even additional strength from Napoleon. But I at the end felt like it's more likely that the modern infantry will be hate drafted, because when we take a look at Malakesh's turn, he has already cannons. He doesn't have a lot of population, but he has lots of resources, and I think this combination of things makes it that just being able to take the modern infantry and upgrade all of his swordsmen would be a very nice and efficient way for him to get some more strength going. And with that I thought it's not unlikely that he would just take this copy of modern infantry, and then I don't know when the second one will be available, while I thought that it's quite likely that the rockets might just wheel around to me, unless one of my opponents maybe is willing to go for a little bit of a small hate draft. But I have now already modern infantry in hand, so with that I should be somewhat safe. I considered just taking none of those techs, maybe just taking movies to have something to invest into, and maybe democracy or something, but those cards at the end didn't feel strong enough for me to justify taking a risk, because if Malakesh then goes for the modern infantry, maybe then for the other players it could get worthwhile to go for small hate draft. Now I think it's not, and now I was confident that I should quickly get those two techs, and I have drawn an early war. I have Napoleon, I have this tactic, so it's not out of the question that I can maybe set up for a little bit of a war here. I draw even another tactic for that one. Of course, it's sadly not that great to have the modern infantry, but I also draw a strong impact, the impact of population. Malakesh offers me actually in the peace treaty, which I maybe could have just accepted. At least it would provide a little bit of additional culture until the end of the game. But then again, I have this tactic, I have a war, and it didn't want to limit my option. But then again, Malakesh has the Magic Castle, has lots of resources. Maybe he will be in a position anyway to threaten in a big enough defense. So maybe I should just take the additional culture here. It could end up being a mistake rejecting that, but it could definitely also... There is a scenario where this could backfire quite heavily, having this pact. But yeah, maybe it's not that likely that I will actually be able to go for a successful war against Malakesh. But he just then maybe feels a bit safer, and maybe even if I go for a war against one of the others, at least he has to be worried about aggressions and maybe a bit more worried about building up some strength. So I think it's fine to reject it, but maybe also the culture could be relevant at the end of the game. Malakesh decides to delay the computers in order to get the food upgrades going earlier. A reasonable choice, even though I think getting this big science boost also would have been extremely valuable for him. He then takes civil service, military theory, and movies, so Darwin is doing some work here. Kharny elects James Watt, goes for an oil upgrade. He's missing one resource to go for a second one, so instead we'll go for the second selective breeding upgrade. And then he will just take Mandela, and I think things are coming very nicely together for him here. The next turn he can go for one or two more upgrades to oil, has then tons of resources, and will immediately switch to a new leader, so James Watt being extremely valuable for him, and the additional civil action for Mandela also will be extremely valuable for him. So I do think that getting Mandela now for one civil action is insanely strong for him here. Brightfuture goes for Bill Gates, which I think should be a good choice for him. Goes up to 10 resource production. Sadly, that also means that he will get more value out of an economic progress. I was also hoping that his economic progress might be out of the deck before Kharny completes his oil upgrades. Then maybe the economic progress could actually end up backfiring. Brightfuture actually goes for a third lab. He is already at plus 12. Also starts going for Rifleman as the cannon developed. Maybe doing the read. I mean, I guess he developed it already earlier. So maybe it could be because of freedom of movement, or maybe he also did a read that when Kharny developed the cannons, that the arms industry is coming. And as you can see, Brightfuture is taking the rockets here, so maybe just had a free civil action at the end of his turn, and of course it can also still be very worthwhile for him to build rockets instead of cannons just for the raw additional strength. It's my turn. I see the impact of population, which I was very happy about that I have drawn it. And the economic progress is revealed. I was happy to see it. I actually get 11 additional resources. My additional blue tokens are doing some work here. And Kharny gets some decent stuff. All of my opponents get some decent stuff, but I also get some very decent stuff. And with that, I was fine, especially seeing it revealed before Kharny, as said, completes his oil upgrades. And with having all of those resources, it was relatively clear for me that I want to invest into the multimedia here. It comes at a bit of a cost though, and that is not going for the spaceflight. I could secure myself a wonder here, but the spaceflight is not the biggest one anyway, because I was now playing on very low science income for quite a while, and I might be able to make it somewhat fine. It will probably be decent, but I valued it a lot more highly to just get the multimedia going this turn, and with having scientific method plus multimedia, then at least the Manhattan project could end up being a fine last wonder if I should be able to get it. So I build a multimedia. I could now just take revolutionary idea, or maybe just take professional sports or efficient upgrade or some stuff, or maybe even satellites, engineering genius with the impact of progress. The satellites could be quite nice, but I decided to play it a little bit greedily here, which I'm not sure if it is the correct choice, because the thing is I still have some war potential if I get the rockets quickly, and also maybe some of my opponents could still end up being in a position to build up some strength. Kharny has all of those techs, Brightfuture has all of those techs. If they have drawn the right tactic in a war, things could still get dangerous. But then on the other hand, building another multimedia is just a lot of value, gives me a big boost. And my thinking was, with not having the rockets available, at least for now, I was still hoping that I will get them at some point, but with not having them available for now, I didn't really want to plan around building up for war. And instead maybe play it a little bit greedily now, then from the next turn on maybe focus on just building up some strength and defending myself, and then maybe with also drawing some more impacts. I was hoping to end up being in a fine position. My culture income is now the biggest. I am catching up to Kharny, who is at the moment still in the lead. And if I'm able to defend myself, I was hoping that I have a decent position here. And with my last civil action, I then take the professional sports, which is a nice alternative to the organized religion, especially because PR is still in the game and two of my opponents have already committed to a leader, so the chance that I might just end up getting PR is actually quite decent, especially with Malakesh having no arenas available. At the end of my turn, I draw some more impacts. Happiness and culture both could potentially be very worthwhile. Malakesh this turn develops the civil service, still isn't going for computers. I'm not sure if it is the right choice to delay those computers for that long. I think the additional science income could have done a lot of work for him, especially with him going for the spaceflight now. So, I think the food upgrades probably were the right choice. Maybe the turn was a bit difficult for him. If he just goes for computers, but maybe he doesn't need those cards as much. Maybe he could have just gone for some upgrades and taken the space flight. At least he builds an additional lab, and the next turn with the revolutionary idea and efficient upgrade, he will be able to go into computers. And the additional lab will also give him an additional culture income with Darwin. So maybe that's all fine, and the additional civil actions are of course quite strong. But those early computers could have been very strong, and now they are already delayed by quite a bit. Kharny offers an international tourism to Brightfuture, so they have two pacts running at the moment. At least both of them have only two wonders at the moment, so it's not the biggest culture gain. Kharny only goes for one more upgrade then goes for Mandela, scores 5 points from James Watt. James Watt was insanely strong here, I think. From a rather weak position, James Watt turned that position together with the oil into quite a strong one, because Kharny is having the culture lead, is now at +9 culture income, and has those techs, might be able to defend himself, and now gets the Hollywood, and with his big resource income, who knows, might be able to make that decently strong. Even though the multimedia is already gone, there's only one copy of movies left. Going into an H3 government form might be difficult for him, so maybe the Hollywood won't be the biggest, but on the other hand, the other wonders maybe also aren't that great for him, so just maybe the best that he can get. Brightfuture offers a military alliance to Malakesh, which sadly means that I'm actually the weakest now. Then he increases his population, takes the second copy of computers, will go into them immediately, getting even more value from Bill Gates. Builds a cannon, builds another cannon, and with that I have to be a bit careful, because it could be that he has positional army, it could be that he has modern army, and then relatively soon he might be able to build up some strength. So the turn before I was very greedy. Maybe I was already too greedily, and the investment and disbanding the warrior could maybe now make it that I am not able to build up strength quickly enough with Brightfuture and goes for something big here. So maybe I was already too greedy, but yeah, at least from now on I really have to do my best to get a lot of strength going. I will see it despite being the weakest, because I have a bunch of nice impacts in hand. I see the impact of happiness. Soon hopefully I will build an arena, and some of my opponents might not have the most happy faces, especially if that is revealed somewhat quickly. The freedom of movement is revealed, maybe not at the best time for me, because I ideally would have liked it to maybe put something like scientific method into rockets or modern infantry or something, but now I can't really use the freedom of movement to help me with my military, and the question was, is it too greedy now to move a scientific method into the multimedia? Maybe it is, but it is also just giving me a lot of value for relatively small cost, so I was at the end willing to do it. But if I would have had the option to put something maybe into rockets or modern infantry, and with that make me a lot safer from potential wars, I rather would have done that. But now I thought about moving a religion into knights or warriors, but that just really didn't feel great, and at least maybe if I don't get punished for this greediness, it could potentially really make a difference, and I have an impact of culture in hand, so I at the end was willing to use the freedom of movement that way. I increased my population with the ocean liner service, and it was clear for me that I will want to have both the rockets and the air forces. I could just build an air force here, but then it could get a bit close with getting both modern infantry and rockets out. There is a chance, especially now with the freedom of movement, that maybe Brightfuture could already do a war at the next turn, especially if the tactic is maybe the positional army. I mean, he is slow in military actions, but if he gets access to the second copy of military theory, then things could get really dangerous. So there's a chance that a war is already happening at the next turn. And with that I also wanted to do my best to be prepared for the next turn, even though going for air forces maybe leaves myself open if I get a copy of tanks to also go for the mechanized army. But at the end I rather decided to commit to the Napoleonic army now. Or actually not, I go for the rockets, not the modern infantry. It gives me additional strength with Napoleon. I can for now only build one rocket. I still get 3 draws, and I take the satellites for potentially even more strength and for the impact of progress that I have in hand. I thought about the engineering genius, which could make it more easily possible for me to go for the Manhattan project, but I don't have the most civil actions, and it will be quite costly to take and finish it anyway. I actually can only do it if it is in the one civil action area, so the chance that I can go for the Manhattan project easily is not that high, and especially as a war defense or something, it very likely won't be my best play. Maybe as in a peaceful game, when the game stays peacefully, then the Manhattan project is a nice option. But now that I was a bit greedy the turn before, and also a bit this turn with using the freedom of movement and paying 3 resources to get this 3 additional culture income, I didn't want to play around a peaceful game too much, and rather went as for the satellites, because I felt like it's very unlikely that the Manhattan project will be good for war defense, unless of course if I can take it at the next turn and finish it in 2 turns. That might be a way, but even then it might be quite expensive, and maybe just building more units could still be better. Keep the tactics, some impacts, and a card. I draw another war, and the impact of science, which I was happy to see. I was also happy to see, now that Malakesh pushed, that the popularization of science is revealed, which gives me and Brightfuture quite a bit of culture against Malakesh and Kharny. Malakesh placed the revolution already, will finally go for the computers, and the popularization of science must have been a very annoying event for him to see, because if that would have been the last event in the deck, he would have gotten also quite some additional culture out of it, so that's quite unfortunate for him. He takes the second copy of Modern Infantry and also the Fundamentalism. Now it's important when this military theory will be in the row, because if it is in the row already before Brightfuture's next turn, there is certainly a chance that he could already war. Without it, maybe he isn't well enough prepared yet. Kharny seeds and opens the arms industry, so finally that event is out. With me developing the rockets, I also get now 2 additional resources out of it, and Kharny at least still gets 4, and with that still the most resources out of it, and I think him developing cannons early on was a clear hint that this event is coming. He also will now finally build a cannon, either has the modern army tactic available, or will maybe threaten it, or he maybe has positional army or entrenchments or something. He builds another opera and takes the air forces. Building this opera is somewhat greedy, because he doesn't have enough, or he does have enough science to go for air forces, so just with the chance that he has the modern army tactic, he is already threatening quite a big amount of strength. So unless Brightfuture has knowledge about both copies, declaring war on Kharny might be quite risky, but if he gets the military theory, maybe he can go for enough strength that he would win the war even if Kharny has the modern army tactic, and that could be bad for Kharny, especially if he doesn't have the tactic. Brightfuture, let's see, is the military theory revealed? No, and with that there's also no war from Brightfuture. Instead he seeds an impact into the deck. The refugees are revealed, which he is able to win. Malakesh will lose a population in 3 culture. He develops the cavalryman, builds one, builds another one, upgrades this warrior to rifleman, takes patriotism, destroys a religion, builds another arena, takes patriotism, takes the mechanized agriculture, and with that I think it's relatively clear what is coming. Or what he is maybe setting up for. He is sacrificing a lot of draws, is investing quite some resources here. He could also just focus on making his internet as big as possible, so I think it's very likely that he has both a war and a modern army tactic available, and then at the next turn he has just enough military actions to declare war, play both patriotisms, build 2 air forces, and reveal the tactic, and that would give him lots of strength. And that was quite worrying for me to see, because I will lose Napoleon soon, and while I can try my best to set up a nice defense, I definitely won't be in a position to defend against a war. And at this point the other 4-player game was already finished, so it's also from metagaming reasons it might be the best for Brightfuture to attack me. So at this point I felt very vulnerable, and I was fearing that the game could turn out to be very bad for me. At this turn I decided to not seed. This has 2 reasons. First of all, at this point it's very unclear how the game will develop. Because first of all there's a chance that maybe the age could even end before Brightfuture's next turn, and then the age ends and stuff happens, or I could get hit by a war, or Brightfuture could hit a different player with a war. Lots of different stuff can happen, and depending on that stuff, those impacts might be good or might not be good. Malakesh at the moment has more science income than me. There's a chance that he might go for Sid Meier, but I don't know that, so impact of science is risky. Impact of culture, if Malakesh goes for Sid Meier, is out of the sudden quite risky. Impact of progress is not that great at the moment, so I decided to at the end just not push here. But I will actually also get strongest this turn, and the last event on top is the international negotiations. First I thought maybe it's actually quite beneficial to just push it, and then at least I will be able to decide what Malakesh has to pay to Brightfuture. But looking at the end of my turn, I realized that all of the things, food, resources, and science, actually would be quite helpful for me. And with that, I thought it could be worthwhile to not push and get strongest, and then actually get the some stuff out of the international negotiations, maybe. This turn is quite difficult, at least with different scenarios how the game could be going, and some calculations might be beneficial to do here, but I was also quite busy. in real life during that time, and so I didn't do a lot of calculations on how culture scores might look like in different scenarios and so on, and rather played by gut feeling. And yeah, this turn I at the end just tried my best to set myself up for war. I will go for the professional sports, impact of happiness and population is coming soon, so I kind of need to do this, and at least it gives me also 4 additional strength. I go for the modern infantry, go for an upgrade, reveal the tactic as I might lose it before my next turn, and then I take urban growth and reserves and go for another upgrade. And that makes me the strongest now. I think that's maybe the best turn that I can do to defend myself. The military theory is in a row, but Brightfuture doesn't really need it any longer. I mean, it could still be strong, but I'm not willing to deny it here. And while I definitely don't have enough strength, threaten enough strength to be able to defend against Brightfuture, I at least might threaten enough strength that there's a chance that he maybe could choose one of the other players as a target. And with making that more likely, maybe it also gets more likely that the other players have really an interest in trying to end the game. Because if I am playing it greedily, the other players might say, well, I will just now really put a lot of resources into defending, and then maybe Brightfuture will just hit Weidenbaum, and then, yeah, then things, and then it could be beneficial for them to not engage. If I tried my best to defend here, then I was hoping that maybe it could be a bit dangerous for them, as maybe they could just also be the target, especially Kharny, who's such a big culture lead, and that maybe if somehow possible, they will try to end the game, and it should be possible with Malakesh having that many civil actions and also Kharny having some spaces free in hand. And so with that, I decided to just play it so that I can defend very nicely, because there would have been the other line that instead of taking the reserves, I could take Pierre and elect him. And then I might get the Olympic Games, and if the age ends anyway, I will get the Olympic Games, I will get more culture income, even more culture income at the next turn, so that could really give me a lot of benefits, but I just felt like if I go for this, and if I don't have the reserves, first of all, my strength potential drops quite a bit, because now I can build a rocket and an air force. Without the reserves, I won't be able to build both of those things. And I have even more culture, and both of those things would make it even more likely. Maybe it's likely anyway that Brightfuture might choose me as a war target, but it's not clear. But if I go for such a line, it might be even more likely. And also I won the first game already, so I decided to not play it greedily, because going for PR, and maybe if my opponents end the game anyway, could be a way to maybe win this game. But even if I don't get PR on the age ends, it's maybe still possible to win, even so then Kharny, with having such a big lead and getting the Hollywood, maybe his lead could then be too big. But I felt like I have won the first game, even if I finish second now, or even third, it's still somewhat fine. And I would still go with a fine position into the 3-player games. And with that, I just did my best to defend, which might increase the chances that the age will end, but I will potentially miss out on PR and the Olympic Games, sadly. So now, of course, I was very interested to see what will happen. Will the age end or not? Who will be the war target if the age doesn't end? I was first of all happy to see that I draw the impact of harmony, because that is definitely a fine event for me. At the moment it gives me plus 24 actually. Malakesh Seeds opens the international negotiation, so I am able to win this. I wouldn't have been able to win this if I would have gone for Pierre. Malakesh decides to pay 3 resources to me. Those resources might be helpful, because now actually just taking and finishing a Manhattan project could also be an option at my next turn, mainly if the age should end. Malakesh goes for Sid Meier, goes for reserves, the urban growth, develops modern infantry, takes engineering, develops cannons, is preparing also some defense, but he also takes a bunch of cards, and with that he opens the door for Kharny to end the age if he wants to, and he also reveals the positional army tactic. And now I was interested to see, will Kharny end the age? He has to take 3 cards, takes them on a military theory, develops it, takes the revolutionary idea, and he takes the efficient upgrade. So with him having that big lead, and with him maybe also being somewhat vulnerable, especially if he doesn't have a modern infantry, if that is just a bluff, and I'm very certain that Brightfuture has the modern infantry, so the modern army, so maybe he doesn't have the second copy, especially with not revealing it yet. So with then it definitely also for Kharny would be quite dangerous to not enter H here, and at least with me not having Pierre, yeah, things are looking good for him. So that is what I was hoping to maybe achieve. Maybe he would have ended the H anyway. Even with me getting Pierre, he will still get big culture income, the wonder. So maybe I could have played it greedily. It's a tough choice, but maybe then it could have been also that either Malakesh or Kharny could have decided, well, it could be beneficial to keep the game on going for a little bit longer. But here Kharny decides to end the game, builds a step of the Hollywood, and interestingly then, well, he then disbands a warrior and puts it into cannon for a bit more strength. It actually doesn't get him out of corruption. He has now just enough resources left to finish the Hollywood at the next turn. And yeah, him doing that maneuvering is definitely a big indicator that he doesn't have the positional army tactic in hand. Now H4 starts. For Brightfuture, it's probably quite unfortunate. At least if he has a war in hand, but the way how he played it, I think it looks very much like he has both modern army and a war in hand. And yeah, at the turn before, he maybe would have needed a military theory in order to declare the war. And now he was prepared, but yeah, the game ends, so that's unfortunate for him. But that's of course the danger of the first position in the late game, that you sometimes don't have that much control over, and sometimes it can just happen that time is running out to go for such a big war. At least he is still getting some benefits out of his strength push. The impact of strength is revealed, and I was actually very happy to see this, because it gives me some points against both Malakesh and Kharny, who I thought might potentially be my biggest contenders now. And Kharny might generally just be in a position to win this game. Brightfuture develops some techs, goes for the internet for 17 points. The internet now isn't the biggest one now that he went for some war efforts. And he has indeed a modern army tactic going up to 59 strength with some air forces on top of that. He would have had quite a big amount of strength. Now it's my turn, and I make a little bit of a blunder here, or at least I overlooked a very crucial thing. As you can see, I start by seeding, and the question what I seed was already influencing on what turn I would go for, so I had to really think about that, because thanks to Malakesh giving me 3 additional resources, what I could do now would be to just take and finish the Manhattan project. It would score me 13 points, I would get a bit of strength, which I guess isn't relevant with the impact of strength being out, but I would just get 13 points. However, with the turn that I will be going for instead, because if I would have gone for the Manhattan project, then I would have seeded the impact of harmony, but as you can see, I seeded the impact of science now, which, if I just finished the Manhattan project, would for me be worse than for Brightfuture. And if I go for the other turn, I will get either 2 or 3 more culture income. I will not fix my famine, so that's already like 7 culture that I score with other sources, so then the Manhattan project is only +6. And then I first of all can generally prepare better for impacts, but I can also seed the potentially better impact into the deck. At least I thought that the impact of science might very well be the better impact, because I looked at Malakesh's civilization, saw he has the space flight, he has 19 resources plus reserves is 23, even if he develops the engineering, he doesn't have enough to go for the multimedia. Well, but the thing that I overlooked is, of course, that Malakesh has also an urban growth in hand, and this one additional resource that Malakesh can save with if he goes for the urban growth instead of the engineering. If he goes for the engineering, of course he can't go for the multimedia anyway. So I just completely overlooked this urban growth. But with the urban growth, if he wants to, he can actually build a multimedia. and then he can overtake me in science income. And he is still getting a reasonable space flight and also has some potentially strong impact. So I was actually playing this turn. The impact of science was always a bit of a the potentially a bit worse against Malakesh, because I'm sacrificing a little bit of points from the Manhattan Project, and the impact of Harmony potentially also would have been quite nice against him, with me having 24 and him potentially only having 16, depending on what he does. But the impact of science might increase my chance to win against Kharny, but the rest of my turn I will fix some impacts that could be potential weaknesses, because I also wanted to secure my second place, but now I completely overlooked that Malakesh can actually build a multimedia if he wants to. Now it might still be correct to see the impact of science, because for Malakash's turn, I actually thought what he might want to do is to play the engineering, finish the space flight, take the red cross, play the reserves for food, and build 3 steps. I thought that could just be extremely strong. He gets 18 points for the red cross, and only Kharny will be able to get 1 step out of it. So 18 points against me in Brightfuture, and the space flight, and the engineering, which is helpful for some impacts. And I thought it might just be very strong. And so that I thought about, but I should have at least noticed that he can actually overtake me in impact of science, and then it's maybe a bit risky to seed it against him, and maybe I would have played it differently, maybe not, I don't know it, but I felt a lot safer about my decision of seeding this impact of science than I maybe should have. The impact of population is revealed. That's a decent one for me, but also for Brightfuture. But yeah, I was quite happy that I had access to this impact. And then this turn I will go for Marie Curie, giving me 2 culture income and, crucially, +1 science, which makes it that I'm before Brightfuture. I then build an additional farm, build an additional professional sports. I basically had to decide, do I want to go for the professional sports or the religion, and that heavily depends on whether impact of architecture or competition are in the deck, and I thought it's not unlikely that at least one of those impacts is in there, and then it would give me 2 more points than just building his religion. And if none of them is in there, then it gives me only +1 point, so I was at the end willing to build this arena. And then I also built even another farm, fixing my impact of balance and getting +5 for the impact of agriculture, which I thought could be a likely impact to be in there, with all of my opponents having some very decently upgraded farms. And yeah, so I decided to play around those impacts, and if I would have realized that Malakesh can overtake me for the impact of science, maybe I could have also just built another lab instead of maybe the 4th farm, but I didn't realize it. And maybe I could still somewhat expect that he goes for the red cross turn, but yeah, that's what I went for, just preparing around some different impacts. I have knowledge about impact of Brockred, so developing satellites doesn't have that much value. It still gives me +4 for impact of tech, but that's a relatively decent impact for me anyway. And it was a bit of a mix. I seeded impact of science to maybe not close the door completely to finish before Kharny, but on the other hand, I also wanted to play it safe and secure my second position, and with that fixing some weak impacts. I also didn't do a lot of calculations for this turn. It was just, again, a bit by gut feeling. Yeah, I'm not sure if this was the correct choice, and I shouldn't have overlooked that Malakesh can just overtake me for the impact of science. I let the red cross stay in the 2 civil action area for Malakesh. He will not develop the engineering, and at this point I realized that I overlooked something. First I thought, what? Is he sacrificing the space flight just for potential impact of science? But he can do both. He can go for this multimedia and finish the space flight for 26 points. And sadly, now he will gain more points out of the impact of science than me. He has maybe the right... He maybe has the right senses here to sense this impact. And sadly, also I don't get as much points now against Kharny. Kharny finishes the Hollywood, goes for the mechanized agriculture, can go for an upgrade. And then before the final impacts, he also copies the positional army tactic and before the final impacts, we can see that I have the second most culture, so I have a bit of a lead before Malakesh and Brightfuture, and I was hoping to keep that lead, even though, of course, now Malakesh will gain some points with the impact of science, but at least he will lose some points to me with the impact of happiness. And Kharny has a decent lead, but I will get some decent impacts with happiness and science, and if the other ones that my opponents have seeded, if there are maybe one or two good ones, there is maybe still a possibility, but Kharny has of course a decent lead, and yeah, has maybe also some decent impacts for himself, so I was not too confident, but it's still possible that I could actually win this game. And then we can see the first impact is the impact of architecture. So building this professional sports has now already paid off, and it's an impact that gives me +9 against Kharny. So with seeing that, my hopes of potentially still being able to win this game definitely went up. The next impact is the impact of happiness, another good one that I had already knowledge about. I'm only 8 points behind Kharny at this point. Brightfuture catches up some points to Malakesh with the Bill Gates bonus, has actually already overtaken him. So Brightfuture, despite not getting the war, might still at least maybe finish third here. There's the impact of industry, that's now a good one for Kharny, giving him +3 against me, and it's quite a bad one for Brightfuture, so he is a bit more behind, but he has a big Bill Gates bonus, so he is still in a position to finish before Malakesh. There's the impact of wonders, that actually doesn't change anything, because all players are getting +11. 2 impacts are left. We see my impact of science, I gain +10 against Kharny, I'm 1 point behind him at this point, and Malakesh, thanks to building the multimedia, gets now +10 against Brightfuture, so he is really now having a somewhat comfortable lead. I mean, with the Bill Gates bonus, not that much, but now it's looking better for him again against Brightfuture, and I'm 1 point behind Kharny now. There's now an impact coming that I don't have knowledge about, and that impact will now decide whether I will be able to win this game or whether I will come in second. And it's the impact of tech. I didn't develop a tech at my last turn, but it's still giving me +4 against Kharny, and with that I'm actually able to win this game with a 3 points lead. And that's all, and also Malakesh at the end is able to keep his third position, Brightfuture at the end finishing fourth. So that was quite an exciting finish here. I actually didn't have the biggest hopes, maybe also partly because I didn't do the biggest calculations, but I was reliant on some good impacts. For example, without something like the impact of architecture, which actually gave me +9 against Kharny, this comeback wouldn't have been possible, so I got a bit lucky with the right impacts being in there. I mean, I could have maybe also gotten more points out of the impact of science if Malakesh would have gone for the red cross play instead of building that multimedia. So I've had some additional points that I could have maybe gotten. But Kharny, after the game, actually revealed that with the finish being like this, he was kicking himself at the end, because he actually had the impact of government in hand and decided to not push it. And pushing it would have given him 3 points and another 3 points against me. He felt that he shouldn't risk it and decided to not push. Maybe he felt a bit too comfortable with his lead. Maybe he was fearing that some impacts could be revealed, that he would improve, and it might very well be. I don't know where the impact of technology was in the deck, but who knows, maybe the impact of tech would have been revealed, and then he would have just scored less points from that impact, and then I would have won anyway. But very likely, if he would have pushed that impact, he actually would have been the one to win. And I mean, with me being the closest one and points behind him, despite him maybe losing some small points against the others, and there maybe being a risk that an impact is revealed that he could have improved, just with basically guaranteed at least getting some points against me. Probably should have seeded it. Of course, after the game we are always a bit smarter. But yeah, I feel like he probably should have seeded it, and yeah, probably that I can definitely imagine that it felt frustrating to then realize that this decision probably cost him the win at the end, unless, as said, the impact of tech would have been on top at the beginning of his turn. So I actually, as you can see, got very lucky. If Kharny would have decided differently here, I just would have finished second. And yeah, but like this, I actually win the game, which I was extremely happy about because at the beginning of H2, I had the series of bad events with getting hit by a raid, border conflict, raiders, uncertain borders, and then also the rebellion shortly after because of losing the uncertain borders. And I felt like, oh, that is a big setback, losing both of my labs. I stayed on one science income for quite a long time, but I had some helps with the ref idea and the knowledge of the ancients. And I was able to get those two strong wonders. And together with the masonry, which at the end provided me, I think, quite some decent value, so taking that over the Code of Laws might have very well been the correct choice at the end, I think. And those strong wonders just completely carried me. And while on one hand you could argue that winning this inhabited territory for a whole army was maybe a mistake because it was the reason why I got hit by the series of bad events, but on the other hand, it also might have been the reason that I got the strong Suez Canal, that maybe the Suez Canal wasn't taken away by one of my opponents, and so it also turned out to be very useful for me at the end. So it's hard to say whether it was actually still worth it despite me getting hit by such a lot of bad stuff. And now, then going into H3, I again felt more comfortable about my position because of my big production, but it was, I would say, quite close. And then I was feeling worse again when I realized that Brightfuture is building up for something big, but he didn't get a military theory, and then the game ended. I'm not sure if maybe Kharny would have ended the game also when I would have gone for Pierre, because then I would have gotten even more points. If I really would have needed to play for a win, maybe I should have done that, but with already having won the first game, I decided to play a bit more conservatively, but luckily, because of the right impacts, and maybe because of Kharny deciding to not push the impact of government, I at the end was still able to win. And with that, I'm of course very happy about my start, and with the two 4-player games having finished, we can also take now a quick look at the standings. And with that, we can take a look at the standings here, and I have quite a nice position now with being able to also win the second 4-player game. I'm at 12 points. I'm already 8 points ahead of the second position player, which is Malakesh. Kharny is at 3 points, Brightfuture at 1. So yeah, I have quite a strong position going into the 3-player games, but still a lot of games have to be played, and comeback is possible still for all of my opponents. But yeah, if I now play solidly and get some decent results, I think I should have got some good chances to win the group at the end. And now, Brightfuture, having had the worst start so far, but I think also maybe a bit unfortunate for him if maybe the game stays one turn longer in the game that we have just watched. Who knows? Maybe he could even win it if he gets a big war going. So those, yeah. So only a small difference here could have made a very big difference for the outcome of the game potentially for him. And yeah, so with that, we are at the end of the video. I hope you're looking forward to the 3-player games. The next video should be coming relatively soon. And yeah, with that I say thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.